Our next session is a panel discussion on the ways in which charitable giving can lead to significant and sustainable change within our communities. We're delighted to have a stellar lineup of panelists who have dedicated their careers to making a positive impact through their respective fields. Please join me in welcoming Maxine Clark, Chief Inspirator at Delmar Divine, Dara Eskridge, Executive Director at Invest STL, Veronica Coleman, Financial Advisor at Edward Jones, and Joe Fisher, President and CEO of Wren. Now, our moderator for today's discussion will be Rich Rifle, Professor of Finance Practice here at WashU. And together we'll dive into that conversation and learn from their insights and experience. So please help me in welcoming our panelists for this conversation.
Now we're going to play musical chairs. We're going to eliminate one panelist at a time. Well, we have a big panel with disparate backgrounds and disparate roles, so I thought in addition to the very brief introduction that Ed just did, I might just ask each panelist, I can barely see you down there, might just ask each panelist to do just a quick self-introduction to give the audience a better perspective. And I would remind everybody that if you've accessed the agenda on the QR code, we've linked to everybody's bios as well. So why don't we start down on that end? Yes.
Good afternoon. Beautiful campus, by the way, my first time here. My name is Joe Fisher. I'm the president and CEO of Wren. And as you'll find out, what I do and what I represent is somewhat different than my great colleagues here, but we're actually, think of us as really a service and technology platform, almost like think about a bridge. And what we do is we connect donors and advisors behind the scenes with charities, and we do that through service and technology, and we support a lot of the big charitable gift funds that are out there. So we're really a force for good as an enabling technology.
Good afternoon. I'm Dara Eskridge. I'm the Executive Director of Invest STL. Invest STL is a hybrid entity. We are part funder, really facilitating investment to neighborhoods here in St. Louis. We also are a convener around the community and economic development ecosystem here, as well as a policy trier. So, we have hunches about things that can advance equitable development, and we build out those pilots, pull together funding to try them, and then share out the learnings so that other places here and across the nation can replicate and scale them.
Good afternoon. My name is Veronica Coleman. I am a financial advisor with Edward Jones. And so you know Edward Jones is a financial service firm. I've been with Edward Jones for 15 years. Prior to moving to the location where my branch is now in the Delmar Divine, which Maxine will talk a little bit about, I ran a practice in Granite City, Illinois. And I moved my practice over here to lead the efforts that of serving the community where my branch is at the Delmar Divine.
Good afternoon. I'm Maxine Clark, and as it says up there, I'm the Chief Inspirator of the Delmar Divine, and spelled wrong. It's D-I-V-I-N-E, but because divine is an important word in the story. But I'm best known in St. Louis for being the founder of Build-A-Bear Workshop, and about 10 years ago, I announced my retirement because there were other things I wanted to do, and one of those things that I wanted to do was help St. Louis be all that it can be, and that's the journey that I'm on today.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the discussion. So our topic is charitable giving and community impact. And I know in my wealth management practice, there's an increasing desire amongst people that are having their wealth managed to discuss charitable giving and active philanthropy, as opposed to, I think, the kind of philanthropy that a lot of people have engaged in the past is what I refer to as checkbook philanthropy. So this is philanthropy that's maybe more intentional, maybe more long-term, maybe a little bit more focused. So that's on the one hand, but then it's also intended to drive real impact, measurable impact. And oftentimes we're seeing philanthropy implemented while people are very much alive and they're rolling up their sleeves and getting involved in the organizations that they're assisting. So it's not leaving all your money to a charity in your will. It's actually engaging with not-for-profits in a way that is more meaningful. And then at the same time, holding them accountable for results. I have to say that Maxine and I have known each other a long time. She served on the board of Beyond Housing with me. I think I was chair of the board at the time. And as an aside, she was also instrumental in getting me involved in the Normandy School Board when I was appointed on that board. So we have a long history of collaborating, mostly in North County and North City. And so she, to me, is, she lives what she says. She's committed herself to this. And I remember when Del Mar Divine was just kind of a twinkle in your eye, and this was a heavy lift. And if you all haven't been there to see it, I'm sure Maxine would love to give you the tour. You'll hear a lot about it today, but it's just an amazing vision, an amazing facility, and amazing programs that she's pulled off against, I think, some considerable odds. So you can hold your applause, but she is deserving of a great deal of credit for making that happen. And that's the sort of thing that we need more of in St. Louis that's really going to change this region in a systemic way. So I thought, Maxine, maybe we could start with talk about the vision for Del Mar Divine. And I know, and this will segue into, for the other members on the panel, you're doing a lot with Invest STL, and there's a lot of history with how you got Edward Jones involved in your work. So let's start there, and then I'm going to invite the other panelists in to comment on that.
Well, it's a long story, which we don't have time for today, but I would say that when with Build-A-Bear, our customers were all children and their families. And when I got to see all these children coming into our store and building bears, I knew that I could, with the success of the company, that I could also give back to them. And while we had stores all over the country, I lived in St. Louis, so my focus was going to be on St. Louis. And I am where I am because of my teachers and my education, and I wanted to give back to them. And my high school journalism teacher, true story, I went to give her something, a gift from me when we took Build-A-Bear public. I had reserved some money to give back to my teachers that brought me where I am today. And she said, don't give it to me. She says, give it to teachers in St. Louis, help teachers in St. Louis. And so that's what I did. And that's how I landed in the West End neighborhood, because we were building a new charter school, KIPP St. Louis there, and I got to know the neighbors. And they brought me over to this building that was for sale, the old St. Luke's Hospital, and said, maybe you could do something with this. And I thought, I'm a retailer, I'm not really a developer. And I asked a few developer friends, why don't you join me? And they said, we're so busy, we've got all this to do over at, why don't you do it? I thought, yeah, why don't I do it? So what you don't know, can't hurt you, right? So I started on the project and brought together partners, people to tell me I wasn't crazy. That was really it. And if I knew then what I know now, I might not have done it. So I'm glad I didn't know. And that's the story of most entrepreneurs. You go into something hoping you can make it better, but you don't really know every step of the way. And we purchased the building from the city of St. Louis. It had been abandoned, mostly abandoned for quite a long time, but totally abandoned for maybe about 18 months when we took it over. And in 18 months, an empty building can go from okay to terrible. And that's what we bought, was terrible. It was an old hospital. It had 10 buildings altogether. But today when you walk through it, and I walked through some people this morning, it seems like it's one place that just for people to interact and work with each other. And the vision was really to create, if you know St. Louis, you know Cortex. It was to create sort of a Cortex-like environment for nonprofits to work together, a place they could call home, even if they didn't live there, even if they didn't rent there. But all of our tenants, we have 35 nonprofit tenants, and they have partners. We counted about a week ago, altogether, all those 35 tenants have about 2,500 other partners that they work with in St. Louis that are nonprofits in healthcare, education, mental health, and community development. And we have neighborhood partners that also share our space and come with us and use our space for them. So that was really the vision, was to create a place where people could come together with the technology that they needed. But mostly what happens is just the spontaneous collisions that happen in the hallway. Today I ran into Veronica in the deli that we had. And I introduced her to some people that I know who asked me for her contact information so they could follow up with her. So the idea is that that's what it would be, is if you work together on the same projects and live together. It is a multi-use project, by the way. Let me just say that it's offices for nonprofits, apartments, affordable apartments for teachers, nurses, social workers, public health, public safety, grad students, medical students, people that are still living way below what they should be. And then also retail. We brought a bank, a pharmacy, urgent care, the deli, and also an Edward Jones office to the neighborhood. None of these things existed in this neighborhood before. So we're trying to do a lot at once. And I think so far we're off to a good start. We're 100% occupied, and every day hundreds of people are coming and going in the building, working to build St. Louis to be what's possible. Not me, I'm just the conduit for the space, but it brings me, a lot of joy. Today is a beautiful day. And I walk in there and I said, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Fred Rogers would love our neighborhood.
Right. Thank you for that background, Maxine. Veronica, so you work for Edward Jones, which is one of the most philanthropic companies in town, if not, forget if it was 1 or 2 on the recent Business Journal rankings. It was certainly right up there. And your leadership is very committed to volunteerism of your many employees here. So that's all well and good, but you're running a business yourself, and I assume you're not running a not-for-profit on your own personal business. So could you talk a little bit about this partnership that you have with Maxine and Delmar Divine? Could you talk about how Edward Jones looks at that from a corporate standpoint, but then compare and contrast that maybe a little bit to how this business that you're building there on Delmar differs from the practice that you built in Granite City very successfully?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that Edward Jones saw this as a great opportunity in partnership with Maxine and Delmar Divine, it helps us to fulfill one of our purpose impact areas, and that is to bring financial strength to communities. And so it was a no-brainer for us. So just as Rich said, philanthropic efforts are huge within our culture at Edward Jones. And so it was an easy transition when Maxine came and approached Edward Jones to say, hey, here's an opportunity for us to bring services to a community that historically had been left out as it relates to financial services and under-resourced there. And so I had an opportunity to be a part of some of those conversations. My passion for helping to others and helping to build community made it a no-brainer for me. So I've served on the board for United Way, so I know some of the challenges and the needs within the community, and my passion for helping others. It was just like, okay, here's how I get to marry all of that together. But to your point, Rich, on the contrast, my traditional model is what I would say, and when you think about a financial advisor and how they go about growing their business, I still have a portion of that today, but how it differs in what I'm doing at the Delmar Divine, a lot of the work that I'm doing today requires much more partnership. So there are needs within the community that Edward Jones today, we don't have products and services to meet those needs. And I don't think we're looking to bring those type of services into our firm. So to leverage that, we partner with other community agencies who, first of all, are already trusted among the residents in the area, and they're providing those services that the residents need anyway. So to give you an idea, I think, the foundation for wealth building is credit. And so if someone don't have good credit, that's going to keep them out of a lot of opportunities, make it very difficult for them to rent apartments, to purchase housing. And so and if they're struggling with those things, they're probably not ready to invest yet. So making sure that we have the partnership with organizations that already help to address those issues. And then the second layer of that is making sure families have emergency savings. Because if I don't have emergency savings and I start to do investing, the first time the car tire blows out, I'm coming to the financial advisor to say, hey, give me my money back, right? Mm-hmm. So how are we making a difference and how are we helping there? So partnering with agencies that already have like match savings program to help families become more stable. And then when they become more stable, now we say, okay, let's look at investing. And then how we can build those that investment to start to create surplus for them so that they can then start to pass on generational wealth. It's a cause and an effort that I'm really excited about. I'm so happy to have my firm supporting that. And I look forward to, how we're going to have a much more powerful impact in the community by taking that approach versus approaching it from a traditional standpoint.
Thank you. So Dara, Veronica mentioned partnership, and you talked earlier about the many organizations that are in St. Louis that you partner with. Could you talk a little bit more about how Invest STL is partnering with some of these organizations? Maybe give an example of how the rubber's actually meeting the road for some of the clients that these organizations work with.
Sure. So we partner with a lot of entities, from local government, branches of federal government that are here, to banks and CDFIs and even wealth advisors. And so a great example, I think, where a lot of these partnerships come together is actually focused in the West End and Visitation Park neighborhoods where Del Mar Divine and Veronica are. So we've been investing in a resident-led neighborhood planning process there. And so if you're not familiar with this footprint, there has been a lot of interest from developers in that neighborhood that has led to a lot of speculative buying. And so we start to see property values spike, right? And with that, we're also seeing, subtle attempts at trying to transition people out of the neighborhood, right? So we see like an uptick in citations for like peeled paint or loose roof tiles, things like that. Eventually, so many of those build up and somebody is then, pushed out because of fees and fines. So in the planning process, a recurring thing that came up was, real concern on the parts of residents of whether or not this is going to be a place that they still will be able to own and that they'll still be able to just feel a sense of pride in and belonging to. And so we started to think about, what are the tactics around anti-displacement? What are the ways that we can employ to support people who have been here to be able to continue to stay in the neighborhood and benefit from the economic uptick that's coming because of all of the new interest in the footprint? And so we worked with a series of partners, including the Federal Reserve Bank, PlanCorp, Urban Institute, the Center for Civic Research and Innovation, and others to design a direct household level investing strategy as an anti-displacement tactic. And so we launched it earlier this year. It's called Rooted, Cultivating Black Wealth in Place. And I encourage you all, go to the website, you can see more information about it. But the way that it operates is we have 50 households in the footprint who were randomly selected, and each household is paired with a financial planner, right? The importance of this was so common in neighborhoods like the West End and Visitation Park. We reduce conversations around money to budgeting. How many ways can we slice a dollar, and how can you improve your behaviors to make that dollar go further? We do not have wealth building, long-term, economic strategy conversations. And those are very different conversations. When you're thinking long-term, how you plan for your money is completely different from when somebody is sitting in front of you and telling you, don't have that $1 or that $3 Frappuccino, right? These are very different conversations. And so it was really important to us that we team up with financial planners to have those conversations, like Veronica is saying, like getting them an early start on starting to think on that path. So with their financial planners, and we've got 22 representing 8 different financial services institutions. They'll work with them to do a long-term estate plan, the wealth building goals, and then they'll be presented with first $2,000 that they can use to put in savings or for debt mitigation, handle immediate needs. But then they'll also have $20,000 each household that they will use to invest in one of 4 ways. So they can use it to purchase property in the neighborhood, fix up property that they already own in the neighborhood, start, expand, or invest in an existing business in the neighborhood. Or if none of those really feel right for them in the moment, they can use it to invest in stocks, bonds, and other kind of traditional asset classes. We're not saying that 20,000, is wealth, right? But we're observing for over a 3-year pilot, is this kind of transfer enough to seed wealth building? And does it support being able to stay in the neighborhood that they've loved for so long? And so the partnerships that make this work are, of course, the financial institutions that are providing the financial advisors, as well as, thought partners like the Federal Reserve Bank, some other corporate entities who are actually putting up money. So for this, we specifically have Wells Fargo and Edward Jones and NISA and a few other financial services entities who are providing funds. But then we also have like the Small Business Empowerment Center, right? Who's going to be working with those households who want to invest in small businesses to really help them think about business planning. We've got another CDC that runs a whole home repair thing, and they've got a core of contractors, right, to help property owners with that course. And then we've got the St. Louis Realtors Association, who's kind of coaching people on, one, what does the market look like for purchasing property here? Where are the best lenders to get the best terms? And then helping them pair up with actual agents so that they can get the properties under contract. And so, right, it takes a large range of partnerships to really build off something, to help something like this really take off at scale.
Well, Dara, I don't know if you're looking for additional partners.
Yes.
I'm sure you're looking for additional funders. You always are. And I'll ask on your behalf if anybody wants to engage with her organization and become a funder, please reach out. But we have a lot of people in the audience that are in the financial planning business and may have corporate foundations, and I'm sure they'd be happy to learn more about that.
Well, we are always happy to receive additional contributions. However, really my direct ask here is for those of you who are financial planners, or you come from an entity that has financial planners. We have 22. We had about 3 drop off since we originally started recruiting. And so we do have an immediate need for financial planners. So if you are interested, please come find me afterwards so that we can get you engaged and onboarded.
Thank you. So when we were preparing for this panel, I made a comment to the group that organizing all of these different charities is like herding cats. There's 14,000 not-for-profits in the St. Louis region. And then I subsequently spoke to Maxine and she said there's 16,000. So I may learn today that there's actually 18,000. But there are a lot of not-for-profits. And I oftentimes think that as a person that might be in need of some of these services, navigating those different not-for-profits is probably like navigating our healthcare system or the Social Security Administration, not particularly pleasant and difficult. So I think to the extent that somebody can be that kind of guide through that is really an important service and can make a big difference. Now, on the topic of many not-for-profits, I think, Joe, you said that your organization is connected to, was it 2 million not-for-profits? Some very, very significant numbers. So if you could give us a little bit of perspective, you're an organization working nationally, and we're talking about philanthropy. I'm curious how many of your clients are now looking at things kind of through this lens that I mentioned in my opening comments about community impact and looking at things over the long term and demanding that not-for-profits are collaborating in a way that's actually going to achieve systemic change as opposed to just some outcome for an event or something like that. Could you comment a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think, pre-COVID, there was a lot of global push or macro push, if you will, around giving. And I think what we saw post-COVID and actually through COVID, a couple dynamics. One, the amount of granting almost tripled in nature, but we saw the dollar value go down. But if you actually really peel into the data, we saw that donors, in conjunction with their advisors, were actually really moving local in nature, right? So you went from, hey, I want to give to the Global Earth Fund to, I want to give to a local organization that might be trying to solve some water issues or a local housing issue. And the other nice thing that we also, as you look at the data, especially over 38 years old, high net worth individuals that are involved in wealth management, we saw that 81% of them over the last 3 years, year over year, their giving continued, right? And there's this myth out there that you go to a cocktail party, you mention you're in charitable giving, and everybody immediately vaults to, well, it's about tax protection, right? And I think you listen to some of the stories here today, nobody mentioned the word tax, right? The giving actually, if you look at the data, far outstrips any savings with tax, right? It gets into belief, it gets into passion, and we saw some of that. On that 81% that continue to give more and more year over year, greater than half, 51%, are actually starting to align their giving with their beliefs. And if you peel into that and double click into that, once again, it's really around mission, local, community, underserviced communities, and things that are happening within the community. So I think part of the texture of what we're seeing in the overall philanthropic world, and especially in high net worth, is this move to, not just at a macro level, but actually how do I align my giving strategy at a personal level, individual level, group level, family level with our beliefs, And actually, there's the connective tissue in the local community. We're seeing that trend in spades, and obviously there's some living proof here of aligning those passions and giving back.
So you mentioned local and longer. I am toss this question out to any of the four that you that wish to, any or all of you that wish to respond to this. My experience in 20 years of work at Beyond Housing is that the work is very much one step forward and then sometimes two steps back or half a step back, and it's fits and starts and all of it. So you have to really have a longitudinal view, and you have to have patience. And unfortunately, the United States is not the most patient culture. And I think, as I referenced earlier, this notion of checkbook philanthropy, where you just write a check and it's for a table at an event or a fair or something like that, and then you're done. I think fortunately it's changing to where it's longer, as you mentioned, Joe. My question is, what are you seeing from funders, whether they're individuals or corporations or foundations, in terms of their patience level? So I think, Dara, when we were talking, you talked about the green shoots of some progress, so you see some success, but it's going to take years and years. It could take decades in some instances. How do you think the attitude of donors is changing with respect to giving that sufficient time and continuing to invest when you're not seeing that social payback that you might wish to see? Please.
Yeah, so one of the things that I don't know that anybody else would agree with me, but I think we sort of started over in 2014 after Michael Brown was killed. That we had a new realization in St. Louis about what it takes, what a community really is, and where is that community? And some people had never been north of Del Mar. And so I think it's a long time. 2014 is really when people started to have a realization that we could build a community here that was safer, more equitable, more inclusive, all of those things. And so we started to travel, to drive our car across Del Mar to see what was going on. So it's taking a long time. And I think Dara she's the ultimate person for patience and planning. And I've learned a lot from listening to her. But I don't think we can go back all the way to this beginning of time. We have to say this was a new realization in St. Louis, and all of us became much more aware of the impact that we could have together and also individually if we had an individual interest. And it takes community. You don't have to do it alone. You can't do it alone, actually. You have to do it with your neighbors, with your friends. And I'm not talking about the people that might live next to you in 63105 or 63124. You have to do it with people that live in the communities that you're trying to help. And they're really incredible neighbors. And I think that so if we go to 2014 as a new starting point for St. Louis, we're just 9 years into it. Dara has a story that I think she'll tell you about how they feel about their work and their timetable. But now is the time. It's really an incredible time to be able to think about our community as not just your neighborhood that you live in, all of the municipalities that exist in St. Louis, but St. Louis as a community and what we can do together and where we can have an impact. You don't have to have a huge amount of money to do it. You have to put your money with other people who are putting their money and then participate, be a financial planner for the West End. There's so many ways to make a difference in St. Louis, and St. Louis is small enough that you can make that contact easily, and it's big enough that when you do it, it's going to really matter. I don't know that I haven't lived, other than growing up in Miami, I haven't lived in any other cities that I think have the potential that we have, the proximity that we have to so much opportunity, and the young people that live just a few miles from here that have so much talent and ability and their families to make St. Louis a better place. So I think we're just starting. I don't think we can go back to 1902 or 1904 or even 1965, but if we use 2014 as the beginning of this, and I think that's when Invest STL almost started, right?
2012.
Yeah, so, so close, so we're just beginning, and it probably got a lot of momentum even after that. People started to be aware. So I think we can't hold ourselves accountable for 100 years ago. We know what happened and we have to face it, but now we can move forward.
If I could, and Joe, I know you want to get a word in here, but with that teaser, I have to hear the story.
Yeah, for a moment I was like, what amazing story. Oh,
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I have to hear the story.
It's okay. Thank you, Maxine. So what Maxine is referencing, so we were founded in 2012 as a reaction, really because HUD said to the city of St. Louis that they needed to change how they were putting out HUD dollars. And so they shifted, but one of the unintended consequences was that there were fewer dollars going towards neighborhood level work. And so a group of volunteers came together, created Invest STL to kind of be this quarterback that we were seeing in like Pittsburgh and Cleveland, and what we were starting to see in Detroit, this aggregator of funding to support place-based investing. So we've been around since 2012. I was hired in 2019 as the first executive director, and then we used the pandemic really to do strategic planning, to think about what truly is our purpose in this region, in this field of so many nonprofits, right? I don't know how many there are in St. Louis specifically, but there are a lot, particularly in the community and economic development sector. And so what we quickly realized was the sector doesn't need more actors and more organizations that we all have to figure out how to take care of in perpetuity. What the sector needs is really somebody to help organize the field, to give them a strong set of practices and policies that they're all operating off of, that we're planting the flag in the same spot and marching toward it, so that we're marching impact in the same way, and that we're helping to build up the capacity of all of these actors to act more effectively and efficiently. And for us, we decided we should be able to deliver on that mission and our vision in a generation's time. And so we have committed as of July 1 of last year to shut our doors by 2042. So we're on a 20-year time frame. We are 2042 comes, whatever we've been able to accomplish, which I think we will be able to do much of it. But even what we haven't accomplished, we will turn over our learnings and say, all right, it's time for somebody else to pick up the baton because we've done all that we can, and whatever's left is meant for somebody else to do. But to your question around, what has patience looked like, right? We've had to think a lot about that with this 20-year sunset. I've seen a significant shift, as Maxine is pointing out, in just the patience of donors. And I think some of it may have come, with 2015 and forward, but I would say a lot of it has really come because of the transfer of wealth and decision-making within families from the older generations to the younger generations. We have relationships with families where they've, in the last couple of years, have transitioned from grandfather or mom and dad making the decisions about their charitable giving and handing it to, their sons, daughters, nephews, right? And that generation has a very different relationship to what charitable giving looks like, right? Where it's not so much the checkbook writing, or even the dictating of what progress needs to look like and the timeline for progress, but really coming to the table as wanting to be a partner and also recognizing the leadership of the organization that they're giving the money to, right? And understanding the expertise of these organizations to really devise the strategy. And I think that is a huge, huge shift, because it is really difficult, I would argue, to be, not trying to pick on anybody in particular, but it's difficult to be sitting in Chesterfield and have your whole life experience be in Chesterfield and wanting to dictate strategies and timelines for something that's happening in the West End, right? And so it's critical that you're actually conceding some of that power and that knowledge to the organization that you're actually investing in and saying, like, you know what, you actually are an expert on what's happening here. How can I be a partner to you to make things possible for you to do your work and to achieve the impact that we both want? And so, Rich, you had said something early on about, part of being a contributor is also holding the entity accountable for impact. And I think that's true, but I would modify it a little bit. It's really about holding the relationship between the donor and the entity accountable to the outcomes, because it takes the two of you working together to really adjust the expectations, adjust the timelines, and adjust the resources that are needed for the impact that you want.
Right. Joe, did you want to weigh in on that?
I just, maybe some of the things that we see when you talk about patience, right? And part of it, what we see is generational, right? The younger generation, you see it in giving. The millennials, in a lot of cases, they're very spontaneous in nature. It's very episodic, right? A hurricane happens, they give relief, which the older generation there was a big loyalty built in. So we do see a little bit of a difference from a generational standpoint, where we've got to figure that out, right? The younger generation, you order something from Amazon, it's there the next day, right? There's this sense of immediate relief and satisfaction. And so what we're seeing from an outcome standpoint, because this panel's a testament to that outcomes take time, right? And it's just going to take, and sometimes not months, but years to actually reach the destination. So with a lot of the younger generation, as they articulated, it's less about the destination and more about the journey, and exposing some of that progress and that journey and getting them excited and engaged with the journey versus because their time horizon from a generational standpoint is so different, right? And so that loyalty, and how do you build that loyalty, but incrementally versus one long sweep. So I think we'll continue to be faced with some of the generational challenges when you talk about giving, and I we'll probably hit on some of, what can be done to engage the next generation. But I think their mindset is a lot different. We all deal with it, right? DoorDash has a food to your house in an hour, and Amazon has a package, right? And so they think of everything in a very different way. And I think as we think about giving into the local communities, both from a fundraising standpoint, it takes time, right? And as from a building standpoint, how do we start to think about marginal gains day in and day out along that journey versus the ultimate outcome that might take years, right? And I think the thing is, the folks running the organizations, great resilience, great stamina, great patience. Sometimes the donors are a little different. And we might have to think about almost like two factions. And as we're dealing with them, how do we make sure that we've got the right engagement model to take them on that journey to hit that outcome?
That's a great point about the difference between the way the donor and the organization may view it. And Dara, I like the way you described, if you haven't lived in that existence, if you don't know all the details and how hard the work is, it's easy to be impatient for results. And I can tell a quick personal story here. I work with Beyond Housing with the grocery store that we opened. When we first opened it, it was on a 10-year run, and then our partner drew out because they didn't want to hang in there. And now we've got a new partner who's awesome, Chris Goodson at Fields Foods. And, it's going to take a while for that to build, but you have to trust the organization. In this case, some of our donors trusting Beyond Housing to say, we can make this work. And I think in society, there tends to be this almost biased, or if you're patient, then you must not really want the result. And in social work and things like that, that's not the case.
One thing I think that's important is to connect the dots, because Normandy is not that far from the West End. In fact, our corner, the corner of Skinker and I guess it must be Page, is where it becomes Normandy. So it's just a few blocks away, is making sure that all of these, we're not competing like a little small chicken pot pie. We're talking about a giant sheet cake here in St. Louis. And we all everybody can share in the wealth and the growth of the community by bringing each other, together. We're doing our summer camp program that we do out of our family foundation. We're also working with the Legacy Center in Normandy. So the same summer camps that are existing in the West End that are free of charge to the children are going to be happening at the Legacy Center. And we can do these things if we talk to each other. So I think that all these things are investments in the present, but they're also investments in the future. And it didn't happen before. I mean, it was, it takes you and me to be on the board of Beyond Housing and then to do some other work and say, why don't we work together? And somebody else to do that. Veronica to come over and start to help build the financial wealth of the people that live in our neighborhood. And it's such a wonderful pie, actually, or sheet cake, I should say, that we're doing. Yeah, it's just really an amazing thing that happens when people work together with a common goal of prosperity, and success for people. Sorry.
So Rich, I just wanted to add one point to that, because to your point on the patience, right? As we're starting to see this mega transfer of wealth and the younger generations think about giving very differently, I think there's a key opportunity for financial advisors to be able to play a role in that, as we're helping clients to start to think about, how do you want the charitable giving that you're doing now? What are some ways that we can support and build that into your financial strategy to start thinking about that difference? So as a financial advisor, as I'm talking with clients about, their charitable giving, having the information that Dara has shared, that's an additional conversation that can be had around, if you're going to give to these organizations, have you considered how you can partner with them to get the outcome that you want to give? Because wealth is transferring, and the way people are giving is different. And I think financial advisors can play a very key role in that.
So as you were saying that, I think there's an element of patience, and then there's also this element of but for, as I describe it. So I've talked to many donors over many years who say, well, if we do this, will it solve the problem? And I would never say this to a donor, but I've been tempted to say, well, if it would just be that, we would just only do that. And to your point about it being a giant sheet cake, Maxine, is it's everything. And some of the things are not going to be particularly effective, and we're not as effective as we might like as quickly, but we have to do it all. And if we don't do it all and do it in concert, we're not going to change things.
I was talking to a funder this morning who was visiting here in St. Louis at the Del Mar Divine from Phoenix. And they were telling me that Phoenix is a lot like St. Louis, the fragmentation of the school districts, the fragmentation of the communities. And I was thinking, like, this is a United States problem. This isn't just a St. Louis problem. But if we want to make this region stronger, and it's so possible, we can all work together. It's not a lot by any one person. It's all of us putting together our own little bit, whatever that is, and saying, if you're giving it to the right people, then we can build this up much faster than we think. But also the patience. I bought this property in 2014 or 2015. I think we closed on it, and it took all this time to get it open to almost 2022. And you think, like, that's went by in a flash. I'm not a patient person, but it took a long time to get everything right, to do it, to build it. The COVID was in there, but COVID didn't really slow us down that much. Maybe a little bit just because of supply chain, but not really. It just took a lot of time to build something that's worth having. Anything, whether it's your education, however many years you have to go to school to get to where you want to go. It takes time, but when you look back on it, it's really not that much time. And so now with people like Invest STL, and I leave every day and I pass by their office, and they have a statement on there about this neighborhood is a chosen neighborhood. People choose where they live. And so I feel like that. I chose this neighborhood too. I don't live there, but I spend 10 hours a day there. And I want it to be successful long after I'm not here anymore. How do we do that together? And then we grow from that neighborhood grows further north and further east and further north and then further east again. And eventually we're at the river, and the river will look a lot different. And I think we can really do that here. I feel it's so possible. If I can do this, I'm a retailer. That's what I do. That's what I did for a living. That's where I made the money. And I think if I can do it, we can all do it, and we can do it together. I don't need to be the expert. I can call Dara. I can call Veronica. I can call Bob Clark to help me with the construction. Whatever it is, there's people to help you create the vision, or for you to participate in the vision. St. Louis is a wonderful place to be able to see the progress. You don't have to drive very far. In fact, this is so close here. It takes me less than 5 minutes if I make the lights to get here every day. And I think, like, wow, this is so close to WashU, and students live in our building, and students live in the West End. And I wonder what they think when they go home at night. Like, do they think, like, this could be better? I want to contribute. And when they have enough wealth to do that, maybe they will, but we have to stay in touch with them. We have to stay connected to St. Louis.
Thank you. I did want to give the audience a chance to weigh in if there are questions. We have Olivia roaming. If there are any questions, we'll take them. So we have one over here. Olivia, can we grab that one? Sorry, it's kind of hard to see.
Thank you all very much for everything you've had to say. I really appreciate your sentiments. This question might be a little more for Veronica. I was wondering, as you're looking at community impact and wealth management, what role you see impact investing having in that, and how we might be able to grow a sentiment towards impact investing.
So when I think about impact investing, more specifically around the work that I'm doing, the goal is, again, that we start to see families that has historically not been participants in financial service for investing specifically, that we have built a strong enough foundation that we start to see more families investing, and again, leading to wealth. As far as, like, how do we measure that? Those are some different strategies. So we're still building out our program, but I am confident that if we have the right foundation, because everything really, is as good as the foundation is built upon. If we have the right foundation, the impact that we would start to see closing of the wealth gap. Other impacts, we'll start to see transitioning of wealth to other families. We start to see increased home ownership in those areas, and families not in stress when they have one unexpected event. So those are some of the impacts that we're hoping to see. And as everyone has said up here, that's a long game. It's a while before we see that.
Was there another question? Sorry.
Maybe just some additional on the impact investing, because we've seen, in the donor advised fund space, if there's one thing that's now starting to come up in every conversation is the term impact, right? And I think the concept of moving, more macro to micro and in the community, people are looking at impact investment vehicles. And I think you're going to continue to see growth and acceleration in that area, because a lot of those programs, the intention and the positive outcomes they're driving around affordable housing, education, youth development, et cetera, is moving at pretty fast pace. So I would say, not being an advisor, but listening to the ecosystem out there, it's definitely something that people are talking about more and more. And I think at the end of that string is folks like Impact, Invest STL, Del Mar Divine. So I think if it's not part of your talk track, you should probably be brushing up on it to see how does that become part of the overall strategy when you talk about wealth management as well as charitable giving.
Paul, you have a question?
Maxine, you mentioned Phoenix, and this is a United States problem. Have you all, in your research going around the country or the world, have found another community that serves as a model of having had particular success in this area?
I think different people are good at different things. Like I first saw in Baltimore, an apartment building that was built in the city of Baltimore for teachers to live in the building because they were having a hard time. And on the main floor was nonprofits. So that like clicked in my head. If they can, it was built for the Teach for America teachers that were coming to Baltimore and didn't have a place to live, and other teachers. And I thought, that's really a great idea. And how could we do that? Because I didn't know at that point how little teachers made anywhere that they worked. And it's all relative to the cost of living in their area. And what could we do? So when you start to understand that too, and you see it, it just went in my back brain. In Tennessee, in Memphis, is it Memphis or Nashville? I can't remember right now, but Crosstown Concourse, which was an old Sears warehouse built in 1924, 1 million square feet. They turned it into what I would call a mashup of Cortex and Del Mar Divine. Opened about 2 years before we did. They were in the process. It's lit apartments, retail, nonprofits. They went about it a little bit different. They got all of the nonprofits in the area to contribute, to say, we're going to take a block of 2,000 square feet in the building, and they committed it that way. We had a harder time with that. That wasn't something that was easy to get here in St. Louis, but that was another inspiration to me. If they can do it that big, what else can we do? So there's parts of this, and across the country, but there's no one place that's been totally successful. The whole city's turned around. I think at Atlanta, I went to the University of Georgia, go Bulldogs. Atlanta has probably done the most with the city of Atlanta, not thinking about it the same way that we are, but when they built the Olympics, I was on that committee when they built the Olympics, it was really intentional about where they were building the buildings so that Clark University and Spelman and Morehouse and Georgia Tech would have new buildings, new places to build a bigger campus. Georgia State University now in the city of Atlanta is one of the biggest state community colleges, 10 times the size of UMSL, because they really invested in it they intended to make that property to be used for Georgia State University. They have 100,000 people going to school there. It's quite amazing. So when you invest in your young people, you invest in the future, you're going to be able to turn that around. And I think that's a really big opportunity here. Teachers teach young people, all of the trickle down, that really does trickle down, by the way. It does trickle down to the people that live in the community when you're investing in those kinds of things.
I would say, just a quick follow-up to that. When it comes to models for metros that are better organizing their giving towards impact, I would look at like Atlanta. Detroit is really starting to make some headway there, and Providence, because their ecosystem is so much better organized between individual funders, community foundations, and then even their financial advising sector, right? Where there's a very clear mandate of here are the priorities that we are lifting up for our community to support inclusive, equitable growth here. And that ecosystem is now conforming to that so that dollars are tracking with those priorities.
Rural communities have a real challenge in this area. And I would say that we have a phenomenal community foundation in Springfield area called Community Foundation of the Ozarks, which operates differently than a lot of community foundations. And if you were to look at that area, and Springfield, Missouri is the bigger city in that area, and see what they've done, they are like a model for a lot of nonprofit works that we might even have in St. Louis. They do the best job in Missouri, not St. Louis, not Kansas City, Springfield, because they're really working together. They're putting their money where their mouth is to build up the rural community. I don't know how many community foundations of the Ozarks there are around the country, but this is talking about urban. It should be easier for the urban communities than it is for the rural communities. And we have to think about that too, because pretty soon they'll be all connected. It'll be a suburb of some other place. But I think the community foundations can be incredibly valuable. And they come to St. Louis, they go to Kansas City. He goes all over the country to see what ideas they can bring back to Springfield metropolitan area.
We got another
I did
question
want to
back there.
say that a lot of what you said has hit home. First Bank has been working with Crisis Nursery for about 20 years, and it did start out with charitable giving, but now it's really come to community impact. So we are working with the moms and teaching them how to interview for jobs. And now the lenders have successfully helped some of the parents for the first time qualify for their own homes. So it's really gone from charitable giving to them having better lives and getting their babies back. And it's been a wonderful experience over the last 20 years, going from making, something go from just a week of taking care of their babies to having better lives, better jobs, and now homes. So it took patience, but it's been a wonderful experience.
Olivia, I think we have a question down here, and this may be our last question, sir. You'll get the privilege of asking that. Sorry, it's the only one I could see, so I picked up. Thank you.
Veronica, earlier you had mentioned that it only takes one unexpected event in the family to throw them off track. And I don't know whether this question be better directed towards you or you, Dara, either one of you. What are the 2 or 3 major things that keep coming up that put a family off track?
So, if we look at a lot of our families, you hear often the working poor. So income for the wages that they're earning oftentimes are not sufficient enough to meet all of their daily needs. And so many families are really living paycheck to paycheck. And so if I'm living paycheck to paycheck, any one emergency completely turns things upside down for us. So those are some of the things that, that's a major one, if there are not enough resources in the household. And so with some of the charitable giving, some of the work that Dara is doing, you're able to help family access other resources to kind of bridge the gap that may be there because of the lack of the savings. So that's why, for me, the partnerships that we're working with is so important to build up that emergency savings so that we can start to bring about that stability and then start to work on the investing side to build wealth. Dara?
So unstable job situations, and not because the person is not showing up to the job, but because the norms for the employer, like they will cut somebody the moment they have a dip in revenue, right? And so then somebody is scrambling for a job again. Unreliable transportation is a big one, right? The car breaks down, or the neighbor that they rely on, can't get them to work, and now they've lost the job. Things around housing. So like if they're owning a house, especially I think about the West End and Visitation Park, right? These are very old homes that require a lot of money to upkeep. And because of the economic climate for that market, it's difficult to get a bank loan to do, some property upgrades. And so, they're trying to just patch things here and there. Eventually that hole in the roof becomes, a gaping hole, and you've got a whole rain system coming into your building. And so then that just throws things off as well. And then, I would be dishonest if I didn't bring up the fact involvement with the criminal justice system for very, just in my opinion, very ridiculous, highly subjective reasons. These things throw families off very easily because now you've got a family member who's, being held for 24 hours with no charges. And the bail is something that is totally unattainable for the household. And then that person will then lose their job. And then here we go. Here's another thing that we're layering on.
I think the statistic is, and I may put my former Beyond Housing board member, Ray Boshara, on the spot because he's the world's foremost expert on this. I think the statistic is the 50% of Americans don't have $400 of liquidity to withstand any of these things that Dara. Does that sound about right, Ray?
Not need an unanticipated. It went from 50% to about 40% over the last 10 years of Americans who could not meet an unanticipated $400 expense without borrowing or selling something. So, but there's other studies that show that financial fragility is even higher than that. So I just want to underscore the key point that many of you have made about how critical it is to have emergency savings. And sort of pairing that with longer term wealth strategy really, I think, is exactly right.
Thank you, Ray, for that. Well, I want to thank the panelists, this great panelists. I want to thank the audience for the wonderful questions. I want to thank the panelists not only for your time today, but for all the great work that you do in the community and for being evangelists to get others involved in the community. It's just wonderful to share this time with you and be in the cause with you. So thanks very much.
It's a joy.